Welcome, dear listener, to another journey into the forgotten corners of history. Tonight, we open the gates of memory and step gently into the land once known as Al-Andalus, the jewel of Iberia, a place that shone with brilliance and beauty for nearly 8 centuries. This is not the tale of swift battles or thunderous conquests, but rather a slow unfolding of dreams, of knowledge, of poetry, and of loss. In this story, we will travel from the year 711, when the general Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the narrow waters of Gibraltar with his men, to the year 1492, when the last Muslim ruler, Abu Abdallah al-Saghir, bid farewell to the palaces of Granada. Between these two moments lies the story of a paradise that flourished and then faded, a tale both radiant and sorrowful. As you listen, let your breath slow and your thoughts drift into the quiet rhythm of the narration. Imagine the soft glow of lanterns in the courtyards of Cordoba, the music of fountains in the gardens of the Alhambra, and the voices of scholars echoing through ancient libraries. This is not just history. It is a lullaby woven from the echoes of a vanished world. Before we begin, I invite you to subscribe and stay with us on these journeys through forgotten civilizations and lost memories. Each story is told with calm, designed to soothe, to relax, and to guide you toward restful sleep, while carrying you deep into the pages of history. Now, let us begin the tale of Al-Andalus, the lost paradise, where faith, art, and ambition once walked side by side until time itself whispered their end. It was the spring of 711 when a small but determined force crossed the narrow strait that separates Africa from Europe. At its head was Tariq ibn Ziyad, a general of Berber origin, leading soldiers whose hearts burned with courage. Legend tells us that upon reaching the Iberian coast, Tariq ordered the ships to be burned, declaring to his men that the sea lay behind them and the enemy before them. There was no path but forward. This crossing was not merely a military maneuver. It was the opening of an entirely new chapter in the history of the Iberian Peninsula. The Visigothic kingdom, which had ruled Spain for centuries, was fractured by internal strife, weakened by rivalries and division. Against this backdrop, the arrival of Tariq's army marked both a moment of conquest and the beginning of cultural transformation. The first great battle came at Guadalete, where the Visigothic king Roderick met the invaders with his forces. The clash was fierce, but the Visigoths were overwhelmed. With this victory, the door to Iberia swung wide open, and the armies of Islam began to sweep across the land, advancing through cities and valleys, each step carving a new reality into the heart of Europe. Yet for the men who marched, there was little thought of empire. Their world was one of survival, faith, and destiny. They passed through hills and rivers, leaving behind villages that whispered of change. In their hearts, perhaps, there was also wonder, for the lands they entered were fertile, dotted with ancient Roman ruins, vineyards, and quiet towns whose people gazed at them with fear and uncertainty. The conquest of Al-Andalus was swift, but it was not merely about domination. With the soldiers came administrators, scholars, and settlers, weaving together strands of Arab, Berber, and Iberian life. From these first encounters would grow a civilization unique in its harmony and tension. A place where worlds collided yet also embraced. And so, from the moment Tariq set foot upon the Iberian shore, history was forever altered. A paradise in the making had begun its story. Though neither Tariq nor his men could know how long its light would shine, nor how tragic its end would one day be. With the first victories secured, a new order began to settle over the Iberian Peninsula. What had once been the land of the Visigoths was now touched by a different rhythm of life. Muslim rule was established, not as a sudden force of destruction, but as a slow weaving of cultures, laws, and traditions. The people of Iberia now lived in a land that carried a new name, Al-Andalus. Cordoba soon rose as the shining heart of this land. Once a Roman city, it now transformed into a center of power and learning. Streets grew busier with merchants, scholars, and artisans, and the air carried the scent of spices, leather, and ink. From its mosques and palaces, Cordoba would one day rival the greatest cities of the world. But in these early days, it was a symbol of fresh beginnings. The people of Al-Andalus were not one people alone. Arabs, who brought the language of poetry and governance. Berbers, whose resilience had carried them across mountains and deserts. And the native Iberians, with their deep-rooted traditions. All of them began to share life under the same sky. Over time, they learned to blend their ways, creating something neither fully Eastern nor fully Western, but uniquely Andalusian. Markets became places of exchange, not only for goods, but also for ideas. Farmers introduced new techniques of irrigation, making the fields richer than before. Artisans crafted designs that combined old Iberian patterns with the elegance of Arabic calligraphy. Even the languages began to borrow from one another, creating sounds and words that carried the flavor of many tongues. Religion, too, shaped the society in complex ways. Muslims ruled, but Christians and Jews remained. Each community given space within the larger framework of governance. The coexistence was never perfect, yet it gave birth to moments of harmony rare for that age. Moments when a rabbi, a priest, and a scholar might all walk the same street, each carrying their wisdom. Thus, Al-Andalus was not only a land of conquest, it was a land of creation. From the blending of traditions, a civilization was born that would astonish the world. And as Cordoba's lamps began to glow in the evenings, their light symbolized more than wealth or power. They symbolized a dawn, a new chapter where many voices could sing in unison, crafting the melody of a paradise in the making. Cordoba rose from the banks of the Guadalquivir River like a shining jewel under the Andalusian sun. In a time when much of Europe struggled in darkness, this city glowed with light and life. Its streets were alive with the footsteps of merchants, the laughter of children, and the quiet whispers of scholars lost in thought. To step into Cordoba was to step into a world of wonder. At the heart of the city stood the great mosque, its endless rows of arches rising like a forest of stone and light. The sound of the call to prayer echoed gently across the city, reminding everyone of the unity that held them together. Travelers who entered Cordoba often stood in silence before its beauty, unable to believe that human hands could create such harmony. But Cordoba's greatness did not come only from its walls and towers. It came from its people. Here, Arabs, Berbers, and Iberians lived side by side, their traditions weaving together into something new and powerful. In the crowded markets, you could hear many languages spoken. and yet all were bound by the same spirit of discovery and hope. Knowledge was the lifeblood of Cordoba. The city's libraries held hundreds of thousands of books, far more than any other city in Europe. Scholars gathered to study medicine, astronomy, mathematics, and poetry. By candlelight, they searched for answers to the mysteries of the world, believing that learning itself was a form of worship. Poets filled the evenings with verses that spoke of love, faith, and the fleeting beauty of life. Musicians strummed their instruments beneath the stars, and their melodies drifted through the night air. Cordoba was not only a city of knowledge, but also a city of the heart, where beauty and wisdom walked hand in hand. And so, Cordoba became the radiant city, the beacon of Al-Andalus, the pride of its people, and a treasure admired across the world. For those who lived there, it was not just a place, it was a dream come alive, a vision of what humanity could achieve when light is chosen over darkness. In the heart of Al-Andalus, knowledge became the brightest treasure of all. While much of the world was silent, Cordoba and its sister cities were alive with curiosity and learning. Here, wisdom from distant lands was gathered, protected, and given new life. The people of Al-Andalus believed that to seek knowledge was to honor both the mind and the soul. Ancient Greek texts, merely forgotten in other parts of Europe, were translated into Arabic with great care. Works of Aristotle, Plato, and Hippocrates were not only preserved, but studied deeply. Scholars did not stop at translation. They expanded on these ideas, questioning, testing, and pushing the boundaries of thought. In this way, Al-Andalus became a bridge between the wisdom of the past and the hopes of the future. Science thrived under this spirit. Astronomers mapped the stars with new precision, guiding travelers across deserts and seas. Mathematicians brought new ways of counting, calculating, and solving problems that would later change the world. Doctors studied the human body, discovering treatments that saved countless lives, while philosophers asked questions about existence, truth, and the meaning of being. This was not knowledge for the elite alone. It touched the daily lives of the people. Farmers learned better ways to irrigate their fields. Architects designed buildings that stood for centuries, strong yet graceful. Musicians and poets found inspiration in both science and faith, blending reason and emotion into works that stirred the human spirit. The spirit of Al-Andalus reached far beyond its borders. Christian scholars traveled to Spain to learn from Muslim teachers, carrying back books and ideas that would later ignite Europe's Renaissance. In this way, the flame of wisdom in Al-Andalus spread across the continent, guiding nations out of darkness and into a new age of discovery. The golden age of knowledge was more than a chapter in history. It was proof that when people value learning above all, they can change the destiny of the world. Al-Andalus stood as a shining example, a land where cultures met, ideas blossomed, and wisdom lit the path for generations to come. For centuries, Al-Andalus stood as one, strong under the guidance of Cordoba's caliphs. But like a great crystal struck by hidden cracks, unity began to shatter from within. The brilliance of Cordoba could not hide the whispers of rivalry, ambition, and discontent that grew stronger with each passing year. The once mighty Umayyad Caliphate faced challenges it could not overcome. The fall came slowly, like the fading of a long sunset. Caliphs struggled for power, While noble families fought among themselves, what had once been a single shining crown of leadership broke apart, leaving the land vulnerable. The great mosque of Córdoba still stood, but the authority that once flowed from it was now divided and uncertain. In place of one ruler, many small kingdoms arose. These were the taifas, independent city-states, each with its own ruler, its own court, and its own ambitions. Seville, Granada, Toledo, Zaragoza, each shone in its own way, rich with art and learning, yet all too often turned against one another in rivalry. The strength that had once defended Al-Andalus became scattered. The taifas competed to show their splendor. They built palaces, supported poets, and invited scholars, trying to outshine their neighbors. On the surface, beauty blossomed, but underneath, weakness grew. Without unity, the small kingdoms struggled to stand against the growing power of their enemies to the north. Christian kingdoms beyond the mountains watched closely. They saw the divisions in Al-Andalus and pressed forward, reclaiming lands little by little. The people of Al-Andalus, once protected by the shield of unity, now faced uncertainty and fear. The Golden Age seemed fragile, like a flame flickering in the wind. The splintering of unity was not just a political shift, it was the turning of a tide. From one great caliphate to many fragile kingdoms, the destiny of Al-Andalus began to change. The brilliance of its culture remained, but the power to defend it was slipping away, marking the beginning of a long struggle for survival. From the misty mountains of the north, a quiet but steady force began to stir. Small Christian kingdoms, once pushed back and weakened, slowly grew in strength and determination. They looked south toward the rich lands of Al-Andalus, lands filled with shining cities, knowledge, and wealth. What began as scattered battles soon became a long and patient effort to reclaim Iberia, the Reconquista. The kingdoms of Leon, Castile, Navarre, and Aragon rose one after another, guided by kings and warriors who dreamed of expanding their power. Their armies moved like rivers carving stone, slow but unstoppable. Every fortress captured, every village reclaimed, became a step forward in their march toward dominance. At first, the Christian advance seemed distant, almost unthreatening. The taifas of Al-Andalus, divided and proud, often paid tribute to their northern neighbors to avoid war. Gold, silk, and treasures were sent across the borders, buying peace for a little while. But each payment made the Christian kingdoms stronger, and each year the balance of power shifted. The battles were not always grand or decisive. Often they were quiet sieges, sudden raids, or the steady planting of crosses where once the call to prayer had echoed. Villages changed hands, farmers adapted to new rulers, and the land itself seemed to hold its breath as destiny slowly turned. The Christian reconquest was not only a military struggle, but also a clash of worlds. Castles rose to face minarets, and Latin prayers answered the echo of Arabic poetry. In the midst of war, culture still flowed both ways. Art, science, and language traveled across borders, even as swords clashed on the battlefield. For Al-Andalus, the Reconquista marked a new and uncertain age. No longer was it the land of endless victories. Instead, it became a land of defense, of resistance, and of survival. The long twilight of the Muslim rule in Iberia had begun. And though the brilliance of its culture still burned, the shadows of change grew longer with every passing century. When the small Taifa kingdoms of Al-Andalus found themselves too weak to resist the Christian advance, they turned their eyes across the sea. Beyond the blue waves of the Strait of Gibraltar lay North Africa, home to powerful new dynasties. The first to answer the call were the Almoravids, a stern people of the desert, hardened by faith and survival in harsh lands. Their arrival brought both hope and fear. They were not only saviors, but rulers. The Almoravids crossed the waters like a tide of steel and devotion. They defeated the Christian armies in great battles, most famously at Saghrahas in 1086, where their discipline and unity saved Al-Andalus from collapse. For a time, the southern kingdoms breathed easier, believing that unity might return under these warriors of faith. Yet the Almoravids, strict in religion and firm in power, struggled to win the hearts of the Andalusians. Their rule was heavy, their ways different from the poets and nobles of Cordoba and Seville. Over time, their strength began to fade, and with it, the fragile unity they had built. Once again, the land drifted toward division. From the mountains of Morocco rose another dynasty, the Almohads. Fierce reformers, they declared that faith must be purified, that the people of Al-Andalus must be guided with a stronger hand. They brought with them new armies, new rulers, and a promise to restore what was slipping away. Their banners spread across Iberia, and for a moment, hope returned once more. The Almohads built mighty cities, and under their rule, the Giralda of Seville rose into the sky, a tower of both beauty and power. They fought bravely against the Christian kingdoms, slowing their advance from nearly a century. But the balance had already shifted. At Las Navas de Tolosa in 1212, their power broke against the combined might of the Christian kings, and the tide of history surged south once more. In the end, both the Almoravids and Almohads left their mark on Al-Andalus. They were outsiders and saviors, rulers and strangers, whose faith carried them across the sea. They held back the night for a time, but even their strength could not stop the slow unraveling of a paradise slipping into memory. As the great cities of Al-Andalus fell one after another, a single kingdom remained in the south, clinging to the mountains and valleys that protected it. This was Granada, the last stronghold of Muslim rule in Iberia. From the 13th century, the Nasrid dynasty rose to guide it, building a fragile but enduring refuge that would shine for more than 200 years. Granada was not large compared to Cordoba or Seville, but it was rich in spirit and clever in diplomacy. The Nasrids survived by balancing tribute to powerful Christian neighbors while maintaining their own culture and pride. Their land became a sanctuary where poets, artists, and scholars found a final home, carrying the torch of Al-Andalus even as the world around them shifted. At the heart of Granada stood the Alhambra, a palace unlike any other. Its walls whispered poetry, its arches framed the sky, and its fountains sang with water flowing like silk. To walk through its gardens was to feel both beauty and sorrow, the beauty of a civilization that had reached its height, and the sorrow of knowing it was the last flame before the darkness. Life in Granada was both fragile and vibrant. Its people traded in bustling markets, wrote verses under the glow of lanterns, and played music that carried across the hills. Yet always, in the distance, there loomed the power of Castile and Aragon. kingdoms growing stronger and hungrier with each passing year. The Nasrids knew that peace was only borrowed time. Still, Granada endured. Its kings fortified their walls and relied on the natural protection of the Sierra Nevada mountains. They navigated shifting alliances, sometimes fighting, sometimes paying tribute, always walking the thin line between survival and surrender. It was a kingdom of resilience, living in the shadow of its own inevitable fate. And so Granada became more than just a city. It was a symbol, a final echo of Al-Andalus, a place where art and memory stood tall against the tide of history. The Alhambra still rose like a dream of stone and water, holding within it the last heartbeat of a paradise slipping away. The year was 1492, and the walls of Granada stood surrounded by the armies of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. For months, the city endured a relentless siege. Supplies grew scarce, fear spread through the streets, and the once proud kingdom felt the weight of inevitability pressing down upon it. The songs that once echoed in Granada's courtyards turned to whispers of sorrow. Inside the Alhambra, Abu Abdallah al-Saghir, known to history as Abu Abdallah, faced choices no ruler ever wishes to make. He was young, torn between honor and survival, between protecting his people and holding on to his crown. The defenders of Granada fought bravely, but they were outmatched, surrounded by a tide that could no longer be resisted. When the city could endure no more, Abu Abdallah agreed to surrender. On a cold January morning, he handed over the keys of Granada to Ferdinand and Isabella. It was not only the end of a reign, but the end of nearly 8 centuries of Muslim presence in Al-Andalus. A paradise built with knowledge, poetry, and faith slipped away in silence. As Abu Abdallah and his family left Granada, legend tells of the moment when he turned back to gaze upon the city one last time. His mother is said to have spoken words that still echo through history. Weep like a woman for a kingdom you could not defend like a man. Whether truth or legend, the words captured the sorrow of a fallen dynasty. For the people of Granada, life changed overnight. Mosques were converted into churches, Arabic voices grew quiet in the streets, and families faced exile or forced conversion. The land that had once been a meeting place of cultures now became a symbol of triumph for one side and loss for the other. Yet even in defeat, Granada left behind a lasting memory. The Alhambra remained, its walls holding the whispers of a vanished world. The fall of 1492 was not just the closing of a chapter, it was the closing of an entire book. And still, the story of Al-Andalus lived on, carried in memory, poetry, and longing, refusing to fade into complete silence. The fall of Granada in 1492 marked the end of Al-Andalus, but the story did not end there. For those who had lived under its skies, the loss was not just of land, but of identity, of memory, of a way of life woven from centuries of culture. Families who had called Iberia home for generations were forced to leave or abandon their faith. Muslims and Jews alike faced exile, scattering across North Africa, the Middle East, and beyond, carrying with them fragments of a paradise that could never be rebuilt. In the streets of Cordoba, Seville, and Granada, voices once lifted in Arabic poetry and Hebrew song grew silent. Mosques became churches, synagogues were abandoned, and the delicate patterns of Islamic art were hidden beneath layers of new rule. Yet beneath the silence, the traces of Al-Andalus refused to disappear. Its gardens, arches, and fountains continued to whisper of a time when knowledge and beauty walked hand in hand. For those exiled, memory became their last homeland. They spoke of the orchards, the palaces, and the rivers of Al-Andalus as if describing a dream. Songs and poems, written in longing, carried the name of the lost land into new centuries. Even today, the word Andalus stirs an ache of nostalgia in the hearts of many, a reminder of what once was. The influence of Al-Andalus did not vanish with its fall. In language, Spanish still carries echoes of Arabic words. In music, the rhythms of flamenco echo the soul of Andalusian melodies. In architecture, the Alhambra and the Great Mosque of Córdoba stand as testaments to a civilization that blended faith, art, and life into something timeless. Europe itself was changed by the legacy of Al-Andalus. The knowledge preserved and expanded there, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, helped spark the Renaissance that transformed the Western world. The lost paradise continued to shape the very future of the people who had once taken it away. And so, Al-Andalus lives on, not only in stone and song, but in memory. Its story is not only one of loss, but of resilience, of beauty that survives even after the fall. Like an echo carried through time, it reminds us that no paradise is ever truly lost as long as its memory continues to breathe in the hearts of those who remember. As the night deepens and the world grows quiet, we can imagine walking once more through the streets of Al-Andalus. The bells of churches ring softly where calls to prayer once echoed, and the fountains murmur secrets of a civilization long gone. Though centuries have passed, the spirit of this lost paradise still lingers, hidden in the curves of arches, in the melodies of songs, and in the whispers of poetry. Every corner of Cordoba, Seville, Sibilia, where Cordoba, and Granada tells a story of knowledge, art, faith, and the delicate balance between beauty and power. Though empires fell and dynasties faded, their essence remains in the memory of those who dream of what once was. The gardens of the Alhambra still bloom in imagination. Fountains still ripple with reflection, and the shadow of history stretches gently over the land. The people who once walked these streets carried wisdom across oceans, leaving echoes in lands far beyond Iberia. Their exile was sorrowful, yet it spread the soul of Al-Andalus into new worlds. Music, language, and ideas traveled with them, reminding all who listen that even after loss, beauty can survive. Al-Andalus teaches us that paradise is not only a place, but also a memory. It lives in stories whispered to children, in poems written with longing, in songs that carry the weight of history. Its lessons of coexistence, creativity, and resilience continue to inspire, even when the stones have crumbled and the palaces stand silent. As we rest now, let us carry this quiet reflection into our dreams. Let the soft echoes of Al-Andalus guide the mind into a gentle calm, a place where history and imagination meet, where beauty lingers, and where even the smallest memory becomes eternal. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and drift with the knowledge that the lost paradise still whispers to those willing to listen. Its story is a gift, an invitation to remember, and a lullaby for the soul.